Do you ever wish your dresser could grow with your space or easily move with you? In this video, I'm building a modular dresser that's easy to customize, take apart, and reconfigure. Whether you're in a tiny apartment or planning for a growing family, this build has you covered. This dresser is made from Baltic birch plywood, which is known for its excellent screw-holding strength, consistency, and pale color. That uniformity makes it ideal for applying a colored hard wax oil, and if I ever want to build another matching piece, it'll be easy to get a consistent look. This full dresser took 2 sheets of 3/4 inch plywood for the Carcass and 2 sheets of 1/2 inch plywood for the drawers. Cutting down plywood in a small shop is always difficult. My workbench is 8 feet long and I add supports so that I'm able to cut it down on the workbench. I first rip all the pieces out, that way I'm only connecting my tracks one time. Since I only use a track saw in the shop, I cut all my pieces to their exact length. I'm following the plans for this build and making my cuts according to the cut list. Make sure you label your parts. This build gets a little tricky as far as parts go, especially if you're wanting the grain to match on the sides. When using a track saw, there are certain things that you can do to speed up a repetitive process. For my miter cuts, setting a stop will help keep all of the cuts consistent with each other. There's a lot of similar pieces in this build, so if you are using a track saw, make sure to set up a stop to speed up the process. If you have a scoring feature on your track saw, you'll want to use that when cross-cutting the plywood. This will make it so that you don't get any tear out with the plywood that you're using. This feature alone, I think, is very useful with plywood. Fortunately though, Baltic birch does have a thicker top layer, so it won't tear out as much. The dresser carcass consists of side pieces, stretchers to connect the sides, and a top. One of the great things with woodworking is if you see something cool, you can try and build it on your own and save a lot of money. That's how I got started in woodworking, by saying, I could build that, but somehow I've spent more money. Go figure. If you're wanting to save some time on this build, I do have plans available on my Etsy store, but you can also try to figure out the dimensions on your own too. I probably would do the same. I assembled the whole dresser using pocket screws. These screws will be fully hidden from view when assembled. While you can use other joinery methods, pocket screws kept it simple and accessible. You'll want to lay out all your pieces and make sure everything is grain matched properly. Make sure you label your parts, as there are lots of pieces. I also marked what edge will receive the edge banding. I'm only edge banding the outside edges. Any edge on the inside will remain exposed. Personally, I like the exposed look. The next step was to drill the holes for the threaded inserts. Now, this feature is cool in theory, and if you're building it for someone who does not own a drill to assemble it, I would recommend threaded inserts. However, on my next dresser build, I will not be adding them. The main reason is because they're a lot of work for something that is not really needed. The whole idea of threaded inserts is to create a strong and reusable connection, whereas a wood screw would eventually not stay tight after so many uses. But with the amount of surface area these stretchers have, you have so much room to add a new screw hole. These stretchers will not be seen from the outside, so I would recommend to just use screws and not overcomplicate it. Now we're going to be edge banding all of these pieces for the drawer carcass. The 2 sides and then the bottom front stretcher will be edge banded. The top one will not be edge banded because the drawer face will cover it. The stretcher that is not covered is set back by 3/4 of an inch to accommodate for that drawer front. I always edge band using a basic iron and it works great. To apply pressure to the edge banding, you can use a J roller or this roller made by FastCap. I then cut the edge off using flush cut trimmers. I check each of the sides to make sure everything is fully glued down. If not, I just go back and hit it with the iron again. One of the complaints about edge trimmers is that they don't work after a while, and it looks like that issue is because the blade goes dull. What I started doing is putting painter's tape on what blade I'm currently using. That way I can just use one blade to cut at a time and when it dulls out, I just move on to the next. These are dual cutting, so there are a total of 8 blades, so it should last me a long time. I also do not cut both edges at the same time. This is because the wood grain can vary slightly from one side to the other, so I just make sure I do one at a time. Sanding the edge helps prevent any snags that would try to peel up the edge banding. This is an important step to prolong the life of the edge banding. I then hit all of the sides with this edge sander. This made the process way faster. Since this plywood is finished grade, I do not need to sand each panel, which saves tons of sanding time. In the past, I've sanded all my panels regardless of finish grade. Let me know in the comments if you typically sand your finished grade plywood panels. For assembly, I added some quick, thick glue, then pocket screws. You just want to make sure that when screwing in the pocket screws that your joint doesn't move around too much. Make sure you clamp it nice and tight and add another clamp if you need to prevent it from moving forward. Since there are so many stretchers and so many pocket screws in the Carcass, I don't know if you need glue or not. I know it will add more strength, but not sure if that extra strength is needed. I'll be making the same dresser again for our home, and will not add glue to see how it works out. Like most assemblies, this was pretty tedious process. You need to set the top stretcher back 3/4 of an inch to accommodate for the drawer face. And like I mentioned before, there will be plans available on my Etsy shop. Once this was assembled, I needed to assemble the rest, but it was super solid. I was a little nervous that the stretcher length was going to be too long to support in the middle, but it worked out great. Stacking these worked out great too. This was the first time I stacked them to see if all my measurements were correct, and I was a little bit nervous, but it worked out great. I waited until the Carcass was done to cut the top piece to length. I just wanted to make sure I had it properly measured, and to my surprise, it was exact. I cut it down to size and then added edge banding to each of the sides. I'll leave a link in the description for the edge banding that I bought. If you're using Baltic birch, you want to make sure that you get white birch edge banding, because natural birch is not the right style. Now is when I built the drawer boxes, but I have another video for that if you want to watch it here. It was time to add the drawer faces to the drawer boxes. I added 1/8 of an inch on each side. I had some 1/8 of an inch Baltic birch plywood left over that I used as spacers. Since I was able to drill from the top, this was actually very easy. It was the easiest drawer faces I've ever installed. Once these were installed, I pretty much had a rough draft of the dresser. But now it's time to break everything down so I could add finish. But before that, I needed to add the backing to each of these dressers. I tend to view this step as optional, but I'm building it for someone, so I wanted to make sure it was complete. For my own pieces, I sometimes skip this step. I've never had an issue, but it does add a lot of strength. To keep this process easy and accessible, I added 1/8 inch backing directly to the back of the Carcass. I added glue and then Brad nailed them down. I added a chamfer to the back so that from a side profile you can't see it very well. Once that was done, it was time to add finish to everything. For the finish, I used hard wax oils from Rubio Monocoat and Rustic Lumber. I used Rubio Monocoat for the Carcass. This was selected to the client's needs and what color they picked out. Then I used a natural color from Rustic Lumber for the drawer boxes. Their hard wax oil is a lot cheaper and the natural color looks almost identical to Rubio Monocoat. However, I think that Rubio Monocoat does have better color options. The combo helps to alleviate the cost while keeping it looking great. After the oil dried, I sanded with 2000 grit to get a polished feel. I ended up adding a 3/4 inch foot to these just to raise it off the ground a little bit. You want to make sure you set the first Carcass properly before adding the rest, because it gets pretty heavy. You can manage these and move each individually pretty easily, but the whole thing is going to be super heavy. Make sure you secure this to the back wall so that it doesn't tip over. These are full extension drawer slides, so it will be easy for it to topple over. The dresser turned out great. and I'll be adding more to the modular dresser, so stay tuned for those videos. Thanks for watching everyone, and I'll see you on the next one.